Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Kalayim, God willing, concluding today Perek Dalet Halacha Vav, and beginning today Perek Hey Halacha Aleph. We're going to be learning today Daf Mem Dalet, and we left off on Daf Mem Gimel Amid Beis by the two dots, Rav Huna, 3 lines before the bottom of the Amid. So first of all, in the concluding sugya of our Perek, the Gemara is going to introduce an opinion. I know that we quoted this in the beginning of the intro in Friday's class, Shitas Rabbi Yishmael, that Ein Avoida Legefen Yechidus. We constantly have been learning, and we will continue to learn, and so is the halacha, that the difference between a kerem and a gefen is that by a kerem you need daled amos, and by a gefen you have to have an empty space around it of 6 tfachim. Only outside of it is one allowed to plant other plants. Rabbi Yishmael is of the opinion that when it comes to a vine, if it's not yet defined as a vineyard, there is no gap, there is no empty space at all that's needed. That's called ein avoida legefen yechidus, not even the 6 tfachim. And we will learn another big klal before we begin the next perek, that kol hamekel ba'aretz halacha kamoise b'chutz la'aretz. So normally we have klalim. As an example, Yachid v'Rabim, halacha kerabim. And indeed, if there's a machlokes regarding Kilei HaKerem, and guys, biblically, Kilei HaKerem applies only in Eretz Yisrael, true that midrabanan, Kilei HaKerem is even b'chutz la'aretz, in contrast with Kilei Zeroyim, that even midrabanan, one is allowed to plant a mixture of Zeroyim b'chutz la'aretz. True, but b'chutz la'aretz, it's only midrabanan. Basically, since midoiraisa, the isur of kilei kaloyim is so much more chamur that it's kadosh and it's asur bahana ba'aretz, so the chachamim said oy bazoi midrabanan even b'chutz la'aretz. But coming back to the klali halacha, that it's true halacha yachid v'rabim halacha kerabim. But we have another rule that whenever we want to know how to behave b'chutz la'aretz, here we say that even if there is only, like as we hear Rabbi Yishmael das yachid, that is very lenient be'eretz Yisrael, by holding that ein avoida legefen yechidis, there is a logic to say that b'chutz la'aretz, you get it? B'chutz la'aretz, halacha will follow like him. Kol hamekel ba'aretz, halacha k'maiseh b'chutz la'aretz. That will be more or less the ending of Perek Dalet, and Perek Hey will open up very similar to the way we opened up in Perek Dalet. We opened up Perek Dalet not by going in an organized fashion like the Rambam, in the rules of Kilei HaKerem, which we ended up learning a lot of them, most of them in the 4th chapter. The basic rules: how do you define a kerem, how many vines, how many rows, etc., etc. The maximum distance, the minimum distance. The 4th chapter began already with the exception that if you had a kerem, and now you have a clearing in the kerem, what is the minimum amount of clearing space that you have to have inside the kerem for you to be allowed to plant in some of it a foreign seed, right? Grain or vegetables. Guys, remember everyone that trees are allowed to be planted near Zeroyim. Trees are allowed to be planted even near vines, even in a vineyard. Just to remember it clear, we're learning about the isur of planting grain, legumes, and vegetables. So you have to have, right, the Beis Hillel 16 amas of empty space in which you can plant in the middle of it, always needing the 4 amas. That was karachas hakerem. Guys, we're going to go over this, but if these are new dinner, it's good to hear it now and to hear it again. Our Perek will begin, and indeed the name of the perek will be Kerem Shecharav. Kerem Shecharav means same idea, but very different. You're starting out with a already vineyard, and some of the vines are being destroyed, like by the Korachas HaKerem. It doesn't matter they were destroyed by a human being, by animals, by nature, dried out, there was a drought, it doesn't matter. But here, Kerem Shecharav means that the vines that were destroyed were not it was destroyed in an organized, specific place, like in the middle, like a bald spot, not the bald spot that many people have that have no hair left, the bald spot that other people have that they have hair, but it's in the middle, there's no hair. That's the korachas, in the middle of the vineyard. Kerem shecharav means that a vine went missing here, a vine went missing there, another vine went missing, and we're going to define what are you remaining with. But there is a large amount of vines that got destroyed, let's say, in a scattered manner throughout the vineyard. That will be the big topic of the first halacha in Perikei. We will also learn, very much connected, a machlokes tanoim. We never had that before. We only quoted the Tanakama. We're going to have a Shitas Rav Meir regarding a vineyard that was never planted in rows to begin with. It's called Kerem Shuhu Natua Irbuvia. It was planted in a chaotic way. Because what we did learn in the previous chapter was Lebesilo, that a Kerem is only defined if you have a minimum of 5 vines that are divided in a minimum of 2 rows. But the way the 2 rows are planted is very organized. Shtayim connected Shtayim ba'achas yoitzezana. And again, machlokes rishonim Rash Rambam. We are learning our sugya kishitas harash, and so is the halacha that it's not the zana. The 5th one is in between daf mem dalid, but it's 3 and 2. But the 3 and 2, the 2 and 2 of the 3 are one opposite the other. What will happen if a kerem was not planted that way? It's just a big balagan. It's disorganized. It's chaotic. Up until now, we have been learning that's not called a kerem. We will see Shitas Rav Meir. And finally, what we will open up with today, and we'll see how far we get. I know that the dafim over the next few days are very small, which is good, easier, don't have to rush. And we're going to have the rule that Ein Zanav L'Zanav. It's a very Hasidish of artist, but we're going to learn it al piniga what it means. It says that it's better to be a Zanav L'Royos, Va'al Tehi Roish L'Shu Olam. It means a person should be in a group where he's the little one amongst giants, instead of being in a group for him to feel good, he's the big knacker. No, be a Zanav. Be a Zanav to the Rebbe. But Ein Zanav L'Zanav. Bist a Zanav to a lion. And we're going to see how this plays out. It's going to be amazing. So, 3 lines before the bottom of the Amid, by the 2 dots. Yeah. So after learning all of these parakim, Kilei Zerayim and Kilei Kalayim, the Gemara puts a bomb. Mamish. Rav Huna, the great Rav Huna, this is in Babel. Zara Karmei Kartin. He planted in the vineyard, he placed leek. And Chevra, he did not leave any space between the leek and the vines. How did he do that? But the Eino Asa Mishum Kalayim. So it clarifies the Gemara. And again, this is going to be something that we will learn, as we mentioned, the second part of the first halacha of the next chapter, that Ma'arbe Van Havion, that the vines, right, were planted be'irvuvia. They were planted chaotically. They had no configuration of shtayim keneged shtayim ba'achas yotzezanav, and therefore it's halachically not considered a vineyard, even though we'll see Shitas Rav Meir. It's not rows. It's a vine and a vine, and my yeshiva bacher planted it. So that doesn't have a din of a kerem. So says the Gemara, fine, I get it. If it doesn't have a din of a kerem, you don't need 4 amas. But do you not need 6 tfachim? The word avoida, right, is the empty space, the minimum empty space that normally is left for people to be able to work. So what do you mean? You have to have 6 tvachim. Daf mem dalit. So Muzman Zagin Ella that the Amoira Rafuna Ki Rabbi Yishmael, which is the Rabbi Shmuel Amar. Wow, this is amazing. And we're going to have them in the 6th chapter. As was Ein Avoida Legefen Yechidis Mamish. You don't need to leave any space if you have a individual vine. Now, guys, we're going to learn more about it later, but we have such a shita, and the Gemara is bothered with how can you paskin like a das yachid when normally you would not do so. So the Gemara explains, and these are unique ways that the Yerushalmi writes what it wants to write. It begins with the words divrei chachamim. Guys, look inside the top Mahara folder. Divrei Chachamim says the Mara Kach derech hashas zeh. You know, hashas zeh means the Yerushalmi. This shas loimed al gedoy la'ameroyim shemevi achar kach. In other words, you want to introduce a statement of Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi. In the Bavli, it would say the Amar Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi. The Yerushalmi gives him an intro. Divrei Chachamim, and who are they? Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi b'shem Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Now you have Lashon Abim because it's Rabbi Yaakov Baridi, it's Rabbi Shua ben Levi. That what? Halacha kedivrei mi shul mekel b'chutz la'aretz. Of course, be'eretz Yisrael, even though we have Rabbi Shmuel Shitas, even be'eretz Yisrael, we get that. But no one would follow in practice halacha l'maisa das yachid. Doesn't work that way. But there is another rule that halacha kedivrei mi shul mekel b'chutz la'aretz. And indeed, Amar Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha, that v'tanye tamon, this approach was even taught in Babel. They remembered, they knew over there Atana. They didn't only have Divrei Chachamim, which is Divrei Amoyroyim. This is actually in the names of Tanoim. Same expression. That halacha kedivrei mi shul mekel b'chutz la'aretz. How great is that? And look inside what that means. Just to conclude this Pedic, look inside the Rashirilio, right? In mamash in middle of the right column. Halacha kedivrei hamekel b'chutz la'aretz, the chol hamekel ba'aretz, halacha kemoisei b'chutz la'aretz. And what's the chiddush? Va'afilu neged harabim. How beautiful. Okay. And on that we say, Hadron Allah korachas hakerem. God willing, we'll come back to you. And with tremendous joy, Chavra, we are beginning Kerem Shecharav. So again, Rabbi, with his Ruach HaKodesh, understanding of how to begin and how to lay out and teach to us the halachos now of Kilei HaKerem, we're opening up with a detailed case. The case is you already have a Kerem, and the vines were destroyed, just to make it, doesn't make a difference, human or nature. But they're not destroyed in the organized way that we had it in Pedic Dalet. No, they are destroyed in a scattered manner throughout the entire vineyard. Now, you have to understand how many were there, how many were destroyed. We're going to have all of this played out in the Mishnah and subsequently a lot in the Gemara. It says the Mishnah, Kerem Shecharav. What we want to know first is how many vines are left. Second, how those vines are configured. Guys, let's review the basics. A beisah, which is an area in which you plant, in which you'll have the earth producing a saw of barley, dafka barley after planted. And we know that that area is 50 amas by 50 amas, or if you want to speak square amas, 2,500 square amas. So if in an area of 25 square amas, you have scattered throughout remaining 10 vines, so that's number one, that's the quantity. And again, since we keep on repeating that even if you can create a kerem with a minimum amount, it has to be configured, minimum means 5 or more. It has to be configured, number one, in 2 rows. Number 2, shtayim keneged shtayim ba'achas yoytze zanav. So the 10 that remain, you have to take a look at it. Guys, we're going to have a lot of pictures of it, so don't worry. And you have to find in it, in those 10, blood anywhere, 2 on one row, 2 on the other row, and a tail coming out from one of them. In which direction? We have 4 directions. We'll see. But it has to meet the minimum criteria of a kerem. That's the meaning of unetu'ais kihil chasam. In other words, you have to have the pattern of shtayim keneged shtayim. If that is what remains, so then fine. Hareze nikre kerem. Now you have different girsa'os. We're going to go with the marafulda. Kerem dal, even though it's called a kerem, dal means poor. It's poor in vines, but it's still a vineyard. It retains its status of a vineyard. Look inside the marafulda, going 5 lines from the beginning of the new Pedic. Kerem dal. Dal means shigafan of muatim. But it's a kerem. Avol mikol makayim din kerem yeshloi. And before we go on, the point is trying to make is that it's not like we learned in the previous chapter. Over there, the first case of Pedic Dalad was korcha be'emtza. There's a bald spot in the middle of the kerem. That's one thing. We're not even dreaming about not having a kerem. Actually, according to the Gemara's Braisa in the beginning of the last chapter, it has to be surrounded by 2 keramim, which means 2 rows on one side, 2 rows on the other side. Even though we learned that l'chora, according to Rabbeinu HaKadosh, It can be even only surrounded by one side with the kerem. This is not the geya bechlal over here. Here, the clearings is all over the place. And now what? And now, well, what do you need to have kevan? If you have a kerem, like any other kerem, whether it is between, whether it is outside of it, you have the shear of the aladamis. Okay. Now, it really connected to the fact that the Mishnah is insisting that unutu oiskil chasim, or like we learned, as we just learned in the story that the Gemara brought at the end of Perek Daled. I know Rabbi didn't write the Gemara, but Rav Huna, he allowed himself a lot of liberty in his vineyard because it was lachatchila planted in a disorganized way. Now we're going to learn a machlokes tanoim about this. Kerem, take out the word dal. Kerem shohu notua irbuvia. It was planted chaotically. Okay, so the dinner says, Rabbi, there's no pattern there. Even though the person did not plant it with a pattern, very much like what we said before, kerem shacharav. After you take a look at it, helicopter view, can you make it's like stargazing? Can you find a pattern in it? If you can find a pattern of what? Shtaim keneged. Now, until now, in the last chapter, you know the words that the Rabbeinu HaKadosh used. He used the words shtaim keneged shtaim ba'achas yotzazanav. What does Rabbi use over here? Shtaim keneged shalosh. There's a reason for that, and that's actually one of the proofs of the Rash, not the Rash Arilio, the Rish and the Rash, right? Who wrote a commentator on the Mishnayos, who argues with the Rambam and who holds that the Zanav is not one in between the rows, as a tail is on an animal, right? It's in between the legs. No. Zanav means that one row has two, one row has three. The one that has three, so there's something that's sticking out, but it's not sticking out in the middle. And the raya, this is a good raya from this Mishnah. Shtaim keneged shalosh. So if you, even though you did not plant it with the pattern, but if there is somewhere a pattern, then harei ze kerem, and there is no machlokes about it. A kerem means vlad. Not only are those five a kerem, then we say the entire chaotic collection of vines that is called a kerem, because there is in it one place where you have the shtaim keneged shalosh. Everything is a kerem, but not the imlav. Here we have the machlokes. So what did we learn until now? This is conforming what we learned until now. Ein kerem. Ein kerem means, guys, that you can plant inside it or outside of it only by leaving the 6 tfachim. Let's put Rabbi Yishmael for the next chapter. If you have 6 tfachim, you're good. It doesn't have a din of a kerem. Rav Meir disagrees with that. Rav Meir oimer that hoyel v'hu nira ketavnes kiramim. There is some semblance to a vineyard. How does it have a semblance? When you plant a vine, you plant one vine, even 2 vines. Let's go with the number 5. Once you plant the minimum number of vines, here the guy planted a lot more. Let's say he planted 50 vines, even though he planted it chaotically. Rav Meir says it still looks like a kerem, and therefore harei ze kerem. So I want to say, I just want to add, I want to say one thing that that's a stringency, but I want to say one thing important. When Rav Meir says hoyel v'hu nira ketavnes keramim, when we learned in the previous chapter that Beis Hillel says that the minimum is shtaim keneged shtaim va'achas yotzazanav, organized. Rav Meir does not argue with that. If you only have 5 and they are planted chaotically, even Rav Meir will hold you don't have a kerem. Rav Meir in this Mishnah is speaking about now, what is the number? I don't know yet. We'll figure that out. When you have a large number of vines, so Rav Meir says, since these are his words, if it would be only 5, let's say 5 on one row, according to Beis Hillel, it's not a kerem. Rav Meir doesn't go with Beis Shammai. Has to be 2 rows. Has to be 2 rows. Shtaim keneged shtaim. But when you have a certain large number, at some point, says Rav Meir, I'm going to say, when a person looks at it, he understands what did the owner intend by planting this. He didn't, there's an apple tree and there's an apple orchard. I don't know what the number is.
Is this a kerem the way I did it?
That's a great picture that you just made. No, you made a case that it's all over the place. But it's somewhere, if you put your head on that angle, you see a pattern. You make a pattern. Says Rav Meir, I don't care if you don't make a pattern. If there is a large number of vines, according to Rav Meir, hadei is a kerem. Guys, we're going to learn about this in the Gemara. But let us first focus a lot on the first case of the Mishnah. The kerem shecharav. So I want to add one more thing just to go back. I think that was on Daf Mem Aleph. This is very important. Actually, if we can actually take a look at it, I think it was, it was on Daf Mem Aleph. We had the machlokes between Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan, if you remember. Whoever has an art school, go to page 41b1. Because when you have the minimum size vineyard, so it's 3 and 2. We're going with the Rashi earlier. Okay, now you have a kerem. Now you have to distance away from it. Let's go to outside of it 4 amas. But don't forget, the kerem is not symmetrical. One row only has 2. One row has 3. So Shmuel says, when you make the distance of the 4 amas, you also don't go symmetrical. It's going to be luchsoin. It's going to be diagonal. The fancy word that we use that after Dan corrected me before the Gabe was here was trapezoid. You're going to have a trapezoid configuration. That's a great picture. Whoever take a look at the Zoom, that's Shmuel. What Rabbi Yochanan said is, we don't do that. That once you have the minimum size kerem, prior to you measuring 4 amas out, royan oisoi, that's the words of the Babli, as if it's called at roya, the words in the Yerushalmi, you have to add this imaginary vine. First thing that you do is you make the rows symmetrical. In the case that we were learning in the minimum of 3 and 2, it's as if it was 3 and 3. Now you have yourself a rectangular, and from there you go out 4 amas. Our whole sugya today, all of it, and God willing tomorrow, is all going to follow Shitas Rabbi Yochanan. So first we're going to establish what is the case of the Mishnah that in an area of a Beisah you have 10 left. Exactly what happened. Then you're going to see how we're going to create a scenario where you're going to have 4 tails. You're going to have 1 kedem and 4 tails. And for every tail, Rabbi Yochanan, you're going to make the royan oisoi. You're going to somehow make it more symmetrical. And from there, you're going to measure out 4 amas. We're going to see what that looks like. Guys, it's very easy. It's very technical. If you don't have pictures, as our grandparents didn't have, then you needed a caveman who made pictures. And now we're lucky. We don't even need caveman. We have over here the art scroll. And so let's go. So
I think we need caveman.
We need caveman. I know. I'm just kidding. That was just the tease. I know. He said, Rabbi Yochanan. Says Rabbi Yochanan, that I want you to know, he korachas hakerem, he kerem shechorav. That it's similar. It's funny. He begins with words that are actually, before he tells you the difference, he tells you it's the same. In other words, the similarity between this Pedic and that Pedic is that you already had a kerem, and then the kerem went from being bigger to having some of it destroyed. The question is, where did it get destroyed? The difference is, korachas hakerem, right, without the words that we had in the Maraful and the Mishnah is makrichin oisoi me emetzoi, that the vines that were lost, only removed, only destroyed from the middle alone. That's called a karachas, a bald area, like a person who has one bald spot in the middle of their head. Our Pedic, our Mishnah, kenem shechorav, is dafke makrichin oisoi mi kol tzedadav. In other words, it got cleared from all over the place. They were removed, like we mentioned, in a scattered manner. The vineyard was planted very symmetrical. You had many rows. But it's not like, 2 rows in the middle got destroyed. No. A vine here, a vine there, a vine here, and a vine there. And now you have yourself a kedem shecharav. So, okay, now if you can put up the picture on 44A3, and that will be great. That will be great. No, you need to have many, many more pictures. 1 second, let me see what you have to have. People have to see A, B, and C. You're getting, but you see all together. Look at all together, blood. If you don't look at them all together, you're not going to get it. And really, diagram C and diagram D from Daf Mem Daled Amud Beis is the same without the English in the middle, but we'll get there. Okay. So the example that Rabbi Yochanan, Rab Ze'eda, okay. So Rab Ze'eda machave lechave. Rab Ze'eda made a picture. Yeah, Kevin, there you go. You're following in his footsteps. What did he do? He made a picture with his mouth, but he was good already. That was better than not. So he gave a mashal that you're starting with Shashurin. You have a vineyard, guys. The vineyard has 9 rows, and every row, we had this illusion already in the previous chapter. It's interesting, Yerushalmi. Min shoiva shoiva means every row has 7. So whoever knows a little bit of math, if you have 9 times 7, 63. Remember they taught me over there in Cheder? That's how you do it, right? 9 times 7 us to 6, 3. So you begin with 63 vines. What happened next? Everything is organized. In other words, what happened was you went from diagram A to diagram B. What happened in diagram B? So he made just giving it a mushal. Again, the only comment I have on the art scroll is that by Jews we put east in the front. But just the people that are looking at this picture, we're going to use his non-Jewish way of putting a map where you put north in the top. So let's go north, south, east, west. The first thing that got removed was a couple of rows north, south, top, bottom. And the way he did it is that he left A, and for some reason B got removed. You leave C, D gets removed. You leave E, F gets removed, and you leave G. So how many do you have left, guys? You have 36 left. I take a lot of pleasure if I can chabla with a mathematical mistake. He's him and Rabbi Chen are very good. Just needs a little coffee. It's not that I'm quicker. It's that I spent more time yesterday. I actually counted. Okay, so don't worry. So the kid said, first you went down north-south. Nisaf shura pira shura l'shasi. In other words, shasi is length. It's first, leave one, remove one, etc. When you're going to the shasi, right? When you're weaving, there's the Erev and there's the shasi. So that's number 1. So you ready? Now you have 36. And then Vaited, continue. Nisaf shura pra shura le'edev. Now remove a row, keep a row, remove a row. We keep a row, remove a row. The same thing across the Edev, the width is east-west. So you go. So you leave 1, you remove 2. You leave 3, you remove 4. So you're going to count. You have now 5 rows. No, 5 rows. You have row 1. Each one only has 4. 5 times 4 is 20. He's giving you the case of the Mishnah. So that is where we're up to. Chavra, turn to Daf Mem Daled Domin Beis. It's very simple. So as the Gemara says, now Nishtayru Sham Esrim Gefanim. Why are we coming to this configuration? You'll appreciate in a moment. Don't forget the Mishnah. The did not speak about 20. The Mishnah spoke about in a base of 10. So now when we're going to get rid of the final 10, you're going to see we're getting rid of it in a chaotic way, but it's going to leave us with a specific pattern that you'll have to have in your mind. Or if we don't have a mind, we can just look at the picture for you to be able to understand the whole Memdala Damat Beis and tomorrow's stuff. That's diagram D. I hope everyone is okay. Now, what I need from you, Kevin, again, is to put up E and F. You have to do that. Yeah, that's good enough. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. I can see it. I don't know how, but just that's it. Leave it like that. Good. So now, Nesaf tartemikan v'tartemikan from the remaining 5 rows. Now begin what he calls the western column. Guys, the western column is a column to the left. The column to the, if you're going on row A in diagram E, if you go to row A, you had 5 rows left, right? Milmayla lamata. So he's saying remove 2 and 2. What he means to say remove 2 and 2 is remove 1A, remove 2A, remove 2A was removed already. Remove 1A, remove 3A. So you remove 2 from the north, leave 3A, and then from the bottom 2 rows, again, you are removing 2 on the bottom. You are removing 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. That's called the
I'm sorry, you said leave 3A, but no, 3A is gone.
I'm sorry, Danny. A5, slicha. Thank you. You go. Even with the pictures, we're making mistakes. Okay, but we shouldn't do that. In other words, from the you have, guys, whoever doesn't see a picture, we have over here 5 rows. Every row consists of 4 vines. What we're doing is that we're going from 20 to 10, but we are removing them in a specific way to appreciate the next topic. So on the left,
would it be correct to say you just took the top two from each corner, like two, in each of the
Danny,
four
the Gemara
corners?
doesn't word it that way. I want to just say faithful to the logic of the Gemara. We're looking at the westernmost column. It had 5. We said there are 5 rows. You removed 2 and 2, which means you left the middle one. It means the only one, and we're going to call that soon, as you'll see. We're going to call that a tail. The only one that's protruding all the way, the only remaining one on column A, guys, is A5. 1, not 2, ain't it? Now, let's go weiter. Now, let's go to the easternmost column, and we're going to do the same thing. Easternmost column, which is row G, also had 5. Again, we are removing 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. Consistent. Here, it's already a Seder. Actually, it comes out that row 5 is geblieben with all of the 4. Tarte mikan. Now we're good. Now, chado mikan v'chado mikan. Where are we going? Chado mikan v'chado mikan. So go back to the northern row, north and south. Which row is that, guys? I'm going to go to E, right? I'm going to go to row E. I'm removing Vlad, 1 on the top and 1 on the bottom. I'm going to go to row 3 now. I'm going to go to row 3 again, and I'm removing 1, 3A and 3G. I'm going to row 7 and removing 7A and 7G. Now we got it. No. Yes.
Right. That repeats.
It repeats. In other words, by sometimes you are removing 2.
I think that's the wrong diagram, Kayvon.
Levan, take away H. You're confusing people. Leave up F. What we ended up is with F. He just wants to show, when he's saying that Kerem Shecharab, that there's a certain non-consistency. Yes.
I think
go ahead.
E1 and E9 are removed in the second statement. E1 and E9 are removed. That gets us to 10.
E1, I know that. Very good, very good. I said that, but don't forget, Vlad,
the 2 on the outside we remove and leave 1 across.
2 and 2. All we need to remove is, okay, very good. All we need to remove is E. Stand correct. All we need to remove is E.
Why are the 2 pictures E and F? They look the same to me.
Yeah, they are, Dan. They are, Danny. Because we're focusing which ones are being removed. So he did it so good, he left them a little bit vague. In F, they're completely, you don't even see where they were. That's all it is. Same thing. Very good. Okay, we made 3 removals. 2 and 2 and 2 and 2 and 2 and 1 and 1. Now you have 10. Yerushalmi, you see, look at the gears. People got confused with the gears. If it says S, then people went out of their minds. Yerushalmi, that's diagram F. That's a good fun him. And Hado he did Taninon. That's, when he taught the Sugya, right, when Abzeira taught the Sugya, he probably made a picture. He showed them diagram F. That's the case of our Mishnah. That you have 10 left. Now, how are we going to look at these 10?
Separated.
So I want you to take a look at diagram G. Don't look at H yet. Take a look at diagram G. In other words, there are so many ways of looking at it. Don't forget that a kerem needs a minimum of 2 rows. 1 row has 3, 1 row has 2. So how would you look at this? How would you look at the 2 and the 3? There's so many ways of looking at it. First of all, you can look at the center of the diagram. Guys, I want to say my words. 3C and 5C and 7C is a row of 3 in C. And you can say 3E and 5E and 7E is another row. You can look at it that way, but we're not looking at it that way. Because here, Vlad, we have, the truth is you have 6, right? Look at those 6. Now, how many more do you have protruding from these 6 that are not even 2? You have 4 schwanz in here. That's really what we're getting to. In other words, you have a row and you have 4 tails. Nimsu. But before he gets there, he words it. Shtayim keneged shtayim ba'achas yoytze zanav. 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 And see it that way.
So you're saying 6 in the center and then 4 surrounding
Yeah,
tails.
but even though he's not exactly wording it that way on purpose, Danny, for some reason, because what we are actually saying is that there's shalish keneged shalish. He's not wording it that way. He's not wording it that way because
He's separating it in his mind. He's seeing it as 2 separate pictures.
he's seeing it as 4 different keramim of shtayim keneged shtayim, and in all of these pictures, there's going to be, where do you have a zanav? Only 1C, only 5A, only 5G, and 9C. Fine. I'm just pointing out, Danny, like like he didn't say 3 against 3. Shtayim keneged shtayim ba'achas yoytze zanav. But you basically 6 of the 10 are not called a zanav, but you have over here 4 tails. Now, what's the issue is? We just quoted Daf Memal, Machlokes Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan. According to Shmuel, there's a concept of trapezoid that we don't even have to bring up again. Rabbi Yochanan insisted over there. Now that you have a kedem, and you want to, you have a kedem, good. You need 4 amas. From where do you need 4 amas? Now, if you keep on looking at diagram G, what you will notice is that he put in over here 6 imaginary vines that are needed to measure from it the 4 amas. Because wherever you have 1 zanav, you put 1 atroya. So since on line number 1C, you have a zanav, in order to know from where do you measure the 4 amas, you don't measure the 4 amas only from 1C. You can't do that. You make believe there is keneged 1C, you have 1E. That's an imaginary vine. That's a halachic vine. The atroyan oisoi bebavli, atroyan. And the same thing will be that since on row 5, you have both a tail to the west and a tail to the east, for each one of the shtayim, keneged shtayim, ba'achas yoytze zanav, depending how you're looking at it, so you can add a atroya 3A, and you add 1 on 7A. You add 1 3G, you add 1 on 7G. And then for the final 9th row, you add the atroya 9E. Now you have this type of configuration. No, it's not a rectangular. It's a Swiss. It's a Swiss flag. Schweiz, Luzern, Rabbi Koppelman. That's what you have over here. And from this, you measure the 4 amas. Now, I want to add one thing, Danny. We learned before a question: do you add by atroya 1 or more than 1? We're only adding for every kedem 1 imaginary. Vlad, we're adding a lot. Well, no, we're not, because that's why Rav Huna meant to say that you have shtayim keneged shtayim ba'achas yoytze zanav. Shtayim keneged shtayim ba'achas yoytze zanav. No, it's from every way you look at it, you only have 1 kedem, and to that 1 kedem you make a symmetrical kedem halachically from which to measure. What's bothering you, Vlad?
E. Column E.
Yeah.
Forget the imaginaries. It's got 3, so there's no way to really make it a count. 3 and 2.
Sure, there is. I'll tell you. Okay, I want to answer Vlad's question. No, I'll tell you what you're doing. You're going to look at it that row C, 3, 4, 5 is 1 row of 3. Okay, look at the row C, 3. Look at row E. Only use 3 and 5. Only use 3 and 5. How many do you have, Vlad? Total of 4. You see that? 4. Shtayim keneged shtayim. And then 5G is the zanav, or 5A is the zanav. That's enough. You have more than enough. For every, you want to look at it that way. I all understand it, that the reason why Rabbi Zajac looked at it that way is because he's allowing himself here to add 6 tails. And now the Gemara's question is, since we mentioned on Daf Mem Aleph that Rabbi Yechanan, you make a rectangular, why would you have such a design? Why don't we add, now pick up diagram H, why don't we add another 4 atroya? A1, G1, A9, and G9. Notice, why don't we box it out when it comes to this concept of we don't make it loichsoin, you make it more symmetrical. Don't forget that on row 5, you have 5A and 5G. So that will be the rule that you don't make a zanov to a zanov. Don't be a shvans to a shvans. Be a shvans to a leader. Be a zanov la royas. So that's what the Gemara is addressing over here. And let's go read it, and let's go see how far we get. And then, God willing, we're going to pick this up tomorrow. So it says the Gemara, At roye ki'ilu acheres natuya kan. Ki'ilu acheres natuya kan. Ki'ilu acheres natuya kan. Ki'ilu acheres natuya kan. Okay. In other words, what you do is, you do diagram G. You do add 6. But there's a limit. You add 6, but you don't add the other 10. You don't add the other 10. And that's what the Gemara is saying at the end of Daf Mem Daled.
When you say the other 10, you mean the other 4, right? The 4 corners.
Yeah, because very good. You know, you had 63. You ended up with 20. Then the Gemara went from 20 to 10. Now we're placing them back to measure from it the 4 amas. So from the 10, the final 10 that you removed, we added 6, Danny. But now the question is, like, why don't you add the other 4? Because you can't. Says the Gemara, Lita Khan ain't yachol. Let's say Lita Khan, let's say is A1. Like, why don't you add A1? Why? Because C1 is only 1. On row 1, the hasmar ain't it.
So don't you need 4 amos in each direction?
No, but from where? From where? So in other words, just like we allowed ourselves on Daf Mem Daled Amadal Vlad, when you make 4 amas, when you're measuring 4 amas, when you are going according to east, when you're going in the direction of northeast, even though b'mitzias you only have 1 seed, there's only 1 vine, but you know what you do? You add 1 e. So if you're going east, you're not measuring 4 amas from 1 seed. You're measuring 4 amas from 1 e. Hence, when you're going west, here you're only going from 1 seed. Farvas. Why? Why don't you put A1? Why don't you put 1 in A1? Because then A, you are aligning. There's 1 at 5. Make it into a rectangular. You can't do that. Lita Khan einat yachol. Why don't you add 1 in the part of 1A in the picture that he has up? Because that whole line is a zanov. There's only 1 on row 1. And ve'ein zanov l'zanov. And now let's repeat the words until the end of the Amid. Lita Khan einat yachol. Shu zanov, ve'ein zanov l'zanov. Lita Khan einat yachol. Shu zanov, ve'ein zanov l'zanov. And the 4th, Lita Khan einat yachol. Shu zanov, ve'ein zanov l'zanov. We came to the end of the Amid. Mazel tov. Beautiful. You can only add when you have 2. You can add another one. You can't go from a zanav into a zanav. Don't be a chassid of a chassid. Be a chassid of a rebbe. Let's go daven.
Excellent.